Today we're going to be synthesizing all these different skills around acceptance, noticing feelings, into a form of therapy actually called acceptance and commitment therapy. And the whole point of this type of therapy is to be able to handle really, really intense feelings without going to food. And so there's a few different elements of this acceptance commitment therapy that we're going to review today. To make sense of this, though, we're first going to start with the negative cycle. We're going to understand how this whole eating thing spirals out of control from an emotional standpoint. So we're not talking about food today. We're not talking about hunger or fullness. We're just narrowing in on emotions. But how it starts off is you first have a non-acceptance, and then you have an unwillingness to feel that emotion. Then there's an escape, and then there's distress, where you feel really, really guilty afterwards. So how this looks like in practice is, let's say you go home, and then you had a really stressful day. Your boss just yelled at you. And you go home, and you're not allowed. There's a part of you that is either ignoring the stressful feeling from your boss. There's another part of you that says, I cannot handle it. So you cut yourself off from the emotion, you compartmentalize it. Perhaps you just bypass the emotion, just go right to food. Perhaps there's some other way you aren't accepting the emotion as part of your life. You're not even saying it's okay to be there. You're just skipping over the emotion entirely. The second step is very similar. It's where you're unwilling to sit with the emotion. So this is a little bit different. If you do accept the emotion, you say, yeah, it's okay to be stressed, it's okay to be really on edge, my boss just yelled at me, I'm going to feel it. You might not be willing to feel it. You might know you're stressed out, but you might not be willing to feel it. It's like when you go home after, let's say, your boss or some other stressful situation, and then your boss has yelled at you, you know you're stressed out, but you're not willing to feel the emotion. The third step is where you escape. Food. Enough said. Then finally, the distress catches up to you. You can only avoid the negative feelings for so long, and when you practice avoiding them and escaping, they come back even harder. The guilt is overwhelming. Shame. It's horrible. It's horrible. The consequences of your actions have caught up to you. So what happens if we take those acceptance skills that you've been practicing so far, accepting, noticing the feelings, where they're at in your body, sifting through it? You remember that sifting exercise where you notice the situation, what you're interpreting, what you're feeling, if there's any tendencies. So the first thing we do is we accept the feeling, and we have gone over some training on that. We're going to be covering the next two steps in this video today. The next two steps involve the unwillingness to feel the emotion, and then the escaping of the emotion. So, unwillingness is when you cannot sit down and feel the emotion. It's that simple. I'm talking right now. What I'm doing right here is sitting down. I'm sitting actually on a meditation cushion, and I'm still. Nothing distracting me. Boom. And so we want to be able to practice just sitting. Just sit there with a negative feeling. And so we're going to give a little exercise on how to do that. I actually got this from the Zen center that I used to live at for a while. The Zen center, they taught this form of zazen, or meditation. And zazen literally means just sit there. Don't move. It's okay if you have to scratch your face or adjust your posture or whatever, but basically stay still. Just sit there. And the freedom of this power actually comes from when an emotion comes up, when that powerful, intense emotion comes up. Oftentimes all these tools that we've learned, the thinking, the reframing, the hunger and fullness and habits and growth mindset, it all goes out the window. And when you're totally disoriented, the best thing you can do is just sit there. Practice acceptance, just sit there and be willing to feel the emotion. It's gonna be painful. Now here's how we actually kind of build up our willingness. So what I'd actually like you to do is just to think about an upcoming event that where you know there's some negative feeling that's going to happen. So it's going to come up later in your day. So for example, let's say you face a long drive back home and you know that there's going to be a lot of traffic. It's like a holiday weekend, or there's just a lot of traffic, and you know that you're going to have a long day and you're going to have a long traffic ahead of you. So you know you're going to be angry in traffic. That's just you. Pretend that's you. And so I want you to, we're gonna take some future situation where you're going to feel bad, and we're going to plan ahead of time to practice being willing to sit there. So first step is you come up with that future situation, and then as you get closer, as the countdown gets lower, as you're about to be in that situation, notice the feelings of anticipation. What are you feeling as you think about what you're about to feel? Are you feeling nervous, anxious, tense? Maybe you're even feeling hopeful. So let's say you're gonna face traffic at 4 p.m. and now it's 3 p.m. So just notice, what are you feeling as you're going into this situation? Just take note. And then finally, in the actual situation, we're going to spend 5 to 10 minutes, just sitting there. And notice how willing or not willing you are to feel the feeling. So you're in traffic now, and you have 10 minutes. No music, no distractions, just feeling. You're just sitting there basically in traffic, and you're just feeling. And as you try to make an intention to be willing to feel the emotion, there's going to be times where like a minute goes by and you're willing, and then all of a sudden you're daydreaming, or you're closed off all of a sudden. I don't want to feel this anymore. I'm not willing to feel this. I'm angry now that I have to feel this. So as you take this intention to be willing, also notice these moments where your body kind of clenches up instinctually. You turn away from being willing, and you're not willing. And then finally, after 10 minutes, you can do a self-soothing behavior. So that's putting your hand on your heart, journaling, or a bunch of different other ways you can self-care. And in fact, the next exercise, which I'll go over, is about different ways you can self-care. But before we go into that, I just want to recap where we're at so far. So distressing emotions, they arise as the fourth step. The first step, number 1, was non-acceptance. You're not allowed to feel the feeling. Number 2, you aren't able to handle the feeling, so you escape by eating food, and then the distress is when those negative emotions catch up to you. So you have already learned a lot of skills about accepting. So first thing is accept that it's okay to feel an intense emotion. Nothing wrong with you. Make sure you're speaking quietly to yourself, that you're not beating yourself up or criticizing yourself for feeling a negative emotion. We're practicing all these skills of feeling it in our body, staying calm. But then the second thing, which we just went over right there, is practice being willing. Willing, key word, willing to feel. There's an intention here. Normally, previously, we've been saying just feel it in your body. But now we're adding a little bit of an extra subtle nuance. We're saying be willing. Have an intention to be willing to feel the emotion. There's a key phrase here with that willingness. I'm willing to feel the emotion. Even if it's painful. Being willing to experience something doesn't mean that it's going to get less painful. It actually means it's going to get more painful as you open up to it. But this ultimately is the best thing you can do, because this is the long-term solution, increasing your pain tolerance. It's easy, to get lost in food. But now you have the tools of fullness and hunger, and you're eating regularly, and you're not beating yourself up. You're forming new habits. You've had success under your belt. You're now ready. You're in a spot where you can handle this uncomfortable feeling. You can accept it. And so you form a willingness to feel the feeling. And then instead of escaping, previously in some other lessons, we've been going over self-care things. Whether you want, like, what do you need right now? Do you need to distract yourself? So, distraction is a fine form of self-care, actually. Or are you missing an emotional need? Perhaps you need to soothe yourself and go on a walk or take a bath or a hot shower. So we're going to broaden now our repertoire of self-care skills. So this deals with step 3 of escape. We don't want to escape. Instead of escaping, we want to take care of ourselves. And I've just listed a whole bunch of self-care skills. Things like journaling and bath and so on and so forth. And so what I want you to do now is to create a note card. So on this note card, we're actually going to plan ahead of time for a distressing emotion that comes up a lot. So if you're at work, and meetings, I'll just stick with the boss analogy. Meetings with your boss stress you out. Okay, so there's some event that happens in your life. Maybe it's giving a presentation at work, or maybe it's talking to a kid after school. Perhaps it's dealing with a family member. But whatever, there's some situation in your life that brings up anxious feelings, and you can predict this ahead of time. We're going to create a little plan for you to practice your self-care skills. So you come up with a situation that is distressing, and you write down, what escape do you feel pulled to do? So if you are anxious about meeting your boss, maybe you feel pulled to eat cookies before your meeting, or maybe you feel pulled to eat a big lunch beforehand, so you kind of are avoiding that feeling. Try to think about how you normally escape this situation, and then instead I want you to go through 8 criteria. So on this note card, you have the situation that scares you, and then you have a little line underneath it, how you normally escape the situation, and then underneath it there's going to be like 8 bullet points for sounds, sight, smell, taste, cheerleading, praying, meaning, and supports. And so for each of these categories, I want you to go through and list a few different ways you can practice self-care, and do it category specific. So for sounds, listening to music, that's the big one. What type of music do you like to listen to that calms you down? And then sight, do you like watching funny videos? Perhaps there's a painting on the wall, or an image, or going out in nature, the image of going out in nature, the nature cheers you up. So sounds, sight, perhaps there's something you can smell. One time we were working with a lady, and we discovered that she really liked this tea tree oil. Tea tree oil is used you put it on yoga mats to make the yoga mat smell good. And she found out that what she could do when she got home was, if she was feeling really distressed, she could just put a cool washcloth and put a little bit of tea tree oil on the cool washcloth. And this smell really kind of helped her calm down. And then the coolness, she could kind of brush herself. And the beauty of this was that she could still go pick up her kids, she could still work, she could still prepare food for the family. Nothing was stopping her. So this is a quick way that she actually incorporated smell and tactile. How can you touch yourself to make yourself feel better? And this hand on your heart exercise is another powerful way where you can use touch as a way to calm down. And then taste. You know, if you're hungry, if you're legitimately hungry, remember that you can use food to soothe. We just don't want to use food to cope with our emotions. But if you are hungry, get something good to eat. You know? Have a mindful meal. Like, unplug for 5 minutes and just try to taste some food. Make some food that tastes good. And then, so those were the first 4. Sound, sight, smell, taste, and touch, 5. There's actually 9. Anyways, cheerleading. This is an interesting self-care. But do you imagine cheerleaders? Go! You can do it! Come on! You need to be your own cheerleader. So how are you going to cheerlead yourself when you're trying to sit down and feel a negative emotion, and now you're in that grip, you're in the battle with the demon, right? There's this intense emotion, you feel drawn to food, it's like a magnetic energy that's pulling you to food, and you're practicing these 3 key skills: acceptance, willingness, and self-soothing. So you're accepting that you're in this situation, that you're being pulled, you're not resisting it. You're trying to be willing to feel the feelings. You're just trying to sit there and let the pain in. And then you're also, at some time, you're starting to try to practice self-care. Instead of escaping, instead of using food to escape, you practice self-care to soothe. Listen to the tone of my voice. Remember the soccer commentator versus the golf commentator. The golf commentator's calm. So we're practicing that soothingness. So how are you going to cheerlead when you're feeling that intense emotion? Say, yeah, I can do this. What are you going to say to yourself? You can pray. You can try to find meaning. Why am I feeling this uncomfortable emotion? You can practice your growth mindset. And then lastly, something else that's really important is reflecting on who you're going to call. We need social support. And we'll do an exercise later on in this, but just thinking about a friend you can maybe text or call, even just send me an email. Think about somehow you can find support. And so just to recap the second exercise around self-soothing, we're planning ahead of time for an intense emotion. Maybe you come home after work and you know that you always feel intense emotions after work. So then the first thing is anticipating it. The second thing is just being aware of your normal tendencies. What do you normally do to avoid feeling these uncomfortable feelings? And then thirdly, come up with a little list. You don't have to list all 9, don't get me wrong, but try to come up with like a few different categories of soothing, whether that's taste or smell or finding meaning, praying. Come up with like a little sequence of you to practice self-soothing. And so the next time these uncomfortable emotions come up, we're kind of prepared. We're not taken so off guard, and the food isn't just in our mouth all of a sudden, but we've taken the time to collect ourselves and create a graceful plan so we can handle the situation with grace. So that's all for the day. Have a good day. Peace.